In the next moment, two massive palms formed entirely of water surged from both sides, rushing toward Edgar with terrifying speed. Caught off guard, he barely managed to extend his arms outward in a desperate attempt to brace against the incoming attack. Nearby, the dragon watched with calm interest. A faint blue glow surrounded his clenched fist as he murmured, "The next move will be more interesting." Suddenly, the walls of water compressing Edgar began to rise, lifting upward with unnatural force. His eyes widened in horror as a gigantic water palm formed above him, poised to strike from above. The black dragon realized he wouldn't be able to escape in time. A second later, the massive palm crashed to the ground with explosive force, kicking up a thick cloud of dust that swallowed the scene. Meanwhile, Michael had finally exited the Florence family mansion. After putting some distance between himself and the entrance, he paused and scanned the area cautiously. Assured that no one was watching, he slipped behind a large tree with a thick trunk. From his pocket, he retrieved an old, weathered notebook, an item given to him by Ivan, who claimed it contained the life experiences of a respected alchemist. Michael quickly skimmed through the pages when, suddenly, a soft white glow began to emanate from one of them. Startled, he immediately shut the notebook. A voice behind him remarked that if he found it interesting, he could borrow it for a while. Michael agreed, noting that the contents were indeed valuable. Opening the notebook once more, he noticed a hidden entry, one that could only be seen by individuals with at least third-rank spiritual power. He was certain Ivan had never discovered this passage, otherwise, he would not have parted with the diary so easily. After a brief search, Michael found the secret entry. It revealed that a man named George came from a distant continent on the planet Odusa. Using elementary magic, George managed to reach Earth, where he discovered the legendary heroic stone. This artifact was said to be incredibly powerful, even accessible to those lacking magical talent. It granted strength to those who could comprehend its true essence. With only a small portion of the heroic stone, George had already surpassed his ancestors, reaching the 4th rank and ascending to the status of a god. However, he was eventually forced to return to his home planet. Before leaving, he taught a group of humans how to open a portal to another world, the White Region, and entrusted them with knowledge that could save humanity. His final message in the diary instructed the one who found it to search for the heroic stone, which he had hidden somewhere on Earth. It was his parting gift to help prevent the coming enslavement of mankind. As Michael reached the end of the passage, a bright glow burst forth from the pages. It lifted off the book and flew toward him, striking his forehead with a sharp, tingling sensation. He closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the energy coursing through him. Moments later, it subsided, and Michael instinctively formed a protective shield around himself. Then, with a surge of newfound power, he ascended into the air. He sensed that this mysterious glow was the key to locating the heroic stone. Determined to uncover more secrets of this world, he soared away from the Florence mansion. Back at the battlefield, Valeria continued observing the scene. Edgar, still pinned to the ground by the massive water palm, was clearly struggling. The new member of the judges, a young-looking boy, possessed terrifying power. Day by day, the might of the judges was growing more intimidating. Suddenly, the dragon landed beside her, interrupting her thoughts. He gave her a reassuring smile and said kindly, "You don't need to be afraid of me." Turning his gaze toward a hovering drone, he introduced himself to the camera. "My name is Dragon. I represent one of the Chinese zodiac signs, and our organization, the Judges, exists solely to fight evil. There is no reason for anyone to fear us." The drone recorded his every word and gesture. However, his brief message was soon interrupted by a loud crash behind him. The black dragon, battered and enraged, had taken on his final form. With sheer effort, he lifted the collapsed water palm off his body and glared at his opponent with eyes full of fury. Dragon turned to Valeria and said urgently, "Edgar has lost his human mind in this state. It's too dangerous for you to stay. You need to leave now." Without waiting for a response, he charged at his opponent. Valeria stood frozen, watching his retreating figure. There was something strangely familiar about him, something that reminded her of the hero in the rooster mask who had once saved her. For reasons she couldn't explain, the feeling stirred within her once again as Dragon leapt toward the raging enemy. Once again, the dragon stood face to face with the protector of the waters. The black dragon held his position, refusing to make the first move. Suddenly, a smaller but much faster stone palm shot toward him. Reacting quickly, the black dragon leapt into the air and clamped his sharp fangs onto the stone hand. However, the palm abruptly shifted direction, thrashing him violently from side to side. From the Olympus office, Austin watched the battle unfold with childlike excitement, cheering at the strength and spectacle of the judges. But the girl beside him did not share his enthusiasm. She stepped closer, concern on her face, and quietly asked whether he had also noticed how cold the room had become. Her question was answered moments later when the black dragon's tail slammed into the building, tearing off half the roof with sheer force. Amelia's expression turned to horror as she imagined what could happen if they too were caught in the destruction. Perched on the rooftop of a nearby house, the black dragon struggled to restrain the stone hand. It proved too strong. With another violent jerk, it knocked him from his footing as the rooftop beneath him crumbled. The black dragon tumbled downward. On the ground, Valeria watched in frozen terror as a massive chunk of the collapsing roof hurtled toward her. She instinctively shut her eyes, bracing for death. But when several seconds passed and nothing happened, she hesitantly opened them. There, standing protectively in front of her, was the dragon, along with his summoned water monster. The creature had caught the falling debris just in time. Valeria waved timidly in gratitude and thanked him for saving her life. The hero returned the gesture with a brief wave of his own. But in his mind, he knew the battle needed to end quickly. If the black dragon continued rampaging, there would be casualties, something he could no longer allow. Just then, a sharp pain pierced through his chest. His mouth filled with the metallic taste of blood. He had been stabbed from behind. Behind the water protector stood the so-called lazy swordsman. With a faint, tired smile, he admitted that he had been waiting a long time for the dragon to let his guard down. The attack had taken everything he had left. Dropping his sword, the swordsman collapsed to the ground, whispering that his role in this battle was now complete. Watching in disbelief, the TV presenter announced that the lazy swordsman had used the wind sword pursuit technique, an ability equivalent in strength to an S rank. But in doing so, he had ignored the consequences to his own body. The commentator's voice trembled as he realized the danger. The black dragon was now vulnerable. If he were struck again, it could be fatal. At the same time, the reporter noted that the dragon had taken a serious risk to protect an innocent bystander, sparking debate among viewers. Edward, who once stood as a protector, now brought destruction, while the dragon's true intentions remained unclear. Explosive Fist couldn't watch idly any longer. Gathering all her strength, she struck the massive water monster. But the blow only tore off a small chunk of its body. Water splashed down onto her, leaving her drenched. Valeria observed that only through the combined efforts of all three heroes had they managed to injure the water creature at all. Meanwhile, the dragon launched a flurry of strikes at his opponent, sending a dozen blades of compressed wind through the air. The black dragon fought back using his tail to deflect them, but one blade broke through, striking him and causing severe damage. The dragon saw his chance. Transforming his fist into a massive block of stone, he charged at the weakened enemy. The black dragon, eyes wide in horror, watched death race toward him. The dragon's stone fist slammed directly into his chest. As the blow landed, the stone fist vanished, and the hero declared that it was time for Edward to surrender. This time, he was truly finished. Mirroring the dragon's strike, another massive stone hand erupted from the ground, seizing the black dragon in an unbreakable grip. No matter how hard he struggled, he could not break free. The hand dragged him downward. A few moments later, a deafening roar echoed through the area, followed by a towering cloud of dust. When the dust settled, Edward was revealed, unconscious and reverted to his human form. The dragon wrapped water vines around both Edward's limp body and the collapsed lazy swordsman. Then he spoke, directing his message toward Gilbert, who had been watching the entire fight from his company's conference room. The dragon's words sparked a furious reaction in Gilbert, who clenched his fists in anger, unable to contain it. Valeria, still nearby, was confused. She didn't understand what choice the dragon had referred to. No matter how many theories crossed her mind, she knew the truth would only be revealed in time. A few minutes passed before she noticed someone approaching. It was the mechanical hero, slowly descending from the sky. Dragging the defeated ice adventurer behind him, he landed near the dragon, who stood waiting. The dragon said there was no need for further discussion, he had already figured everything out. But his attention was abruptly drawn to a strange blue liquid slowly seeping down the armor of the fallen ice adventurer. As if sensing an unseen presence, the liquid began to move on its own, slithering toward the dragon. Sensing danger, the dragon reacted quickly, leaping to the side and dragging the mechanical hero with him to safety. But the mysterious slime had no intention of letting its prey escape. It sprouted multiple tentacles, each ending in sharp, fang-like teeth. The tendrils shot forward, catching up with the fleeing heroes and wrapping tightly around their bodies, rendering them completely immobile. Gilbert stared at the dragon in disbelief. "What the hell is this?" he shouted. The dragon, equally stunned, admitted that he had no idea. Desperately, he asked Gilbert if he could fire off a few blasts to destroy the tentacles restraining them. Before they could act, both men noticed something terrifying. Pavel, who was supposed to be dead, had risen again. Standing in the very center of the slime, he laughed maniacally, his expression twisted in joy. He screamed that power was surging through him and that he was utterly in love with the sensation. Gilbert looked on in horror. He couldn't understand how his ice adventurer had transformed into something so monstrous. The dragon guessed that it was the result of the blue pill's influence. Meanwhile, from the shadows around the corner of a nearby house, another figure had been silently observing the scene unfold. This man, known as Mr. X, watched the berserk ice adventurer with mild disappointment. If things had escalated just a bit further, he said to himself, the experiment might have succeeded. But now, he would have to officially consider subject number 52 a failure. Even so, he acknowledged that the destructive power being unleashed far surpassed that of any previous test subject. Adjusting his hat, Mr. X muttered that the deeper he delved into the study of spiritual power, the more mystical it seemed, and the more it made him question his own competence. He was convinced that he must obtain the third stage of spiritual power, no matter the cost. Only then could he ascend to the level of a great commander. With that thought, he decided to wait for the battle to reach its climax, then seize the dark blue fragment for himself. But lost in thought, Mr. X failed to notice that he was being watched as well. Michael, lurking nearby, whispered that Mr. X wasn't the only hunter lying in wait. Others, too, were stalking their prey. Meanwhile, Valeria reported that no drone could get close to the epicenter of the battle. The signal was too unstable. The camera crew had been forced to retreat to a safe zone. Describing the scene, she said Pavel's transformation looked more like a spreading infection than any form of controlled evolution. The dragon had managed to break free from the tentacles and was now unleashing a flurry of wind blades upon them. But no matter how many he sliced, the tentacles regenerated with frightening speed. Gilbert joined the assault, firing laser blasts from his hands to incinerate the monstrous limbs. The ice adventurer, if he could still be called that, watched their struggle with a calm, cruel smile. Tilting his head, he told them it was pointless to resist. Once he finished with them, he would go after the entire Olympus company. Then, a new thought entered his mind, one that disturbed even himself. He wondered aloud if it might be a good idea to eat the heroes. After all, to the dark blue race, humans were nothing more than food. Suddenly, Pavel was overcome by pain. His head throbbed violently, as if splitting in two. He let out a scream, struggling to focus. The agony faded slightly, and his gaze locked onto the dragon and the mechanical hero. With hatred in his voice, he blamed them for his suffering. A tentacle wrapped itself around Pavel's head, and he sighed with relief. After another dose, he claimed, he felt much better. The clone, observing the situation, warned that Pavel's body was no longer his own, it was being controlled by someone else. If they wanted to end this, they would need to find the real body of the enemy and deliver a critical blow. Gilbert had an idea. He shouted that he could use the exploding egg to destroy the monstrous slime. But for that to work, the dragon would have to figure out how to free him from the tentacles. Without hesitation, the dragon summoned the fire phoenix. Raging flames erupted, burning through the slime's tendrils. It was just enough for Gilbert to break free. Wasting no time, he hurled the exploding egg directly into the monster's core. As it descended, Gilbert looked back at the dragon, who was still trapped, and casually remarked, "Oh, right. I forgot to mention something. The blast radius of the egg is 500 meters. You won't be able to escape in time." The clone cursed aloud. He hadn't expected Gilbert to betray him like this, though, in hindsight, he should have known better. It was just like Gilbert to pull a stunt like this. Rotten to the core. In the next moment, the exploding egg began to glow ominously. Then, with a deafening blast, it detonated, its force echoing for kilometers. The impact left a massive crater in the earth, and thick smoke rose in towering clouds. For a moment, it seemed as if the explosion had obliterated the blue monster entirely. But to everyone's horror, it had survived. The dragon had not been as fortunate. Half of his body was gone. Fortunately, Michael, watching from afar, was relieved to know that it was only a clone. If it had been his real body, he would have been dead. Drones flew in, capturing the destruction in real time. Spectators watching the footage were stunned. This was the first time the judges' organization had suffered such catastrophic damage. But what truly sent chills down their spines was the monster's resilience. It regenerated and returned to its previous form as if nothing had happened. For many, the sight of the creature rising once again felt like an omen of the end of the world. Suddenly, one of the tentacles shot skyward, towering over the nearby rooftops. At that moment, a new figure arrived, the hero of hot and sour noodles. Though injured, he had recovered enough to fight. Right behind him stood Senior, who had also joined the fray. Their presence sparked hope. Seeing their determination, the remaining heroes rallied, ready to join the battle. Valeria, observing everything from the command center, voiced her unease. She said that tonight had become the longest night in the city's history. An unknown force had invaded their home, and the enemy's destructive power was beyond anything they had prepared for. Still, she held on to hope. With so many heroes rising to face the threat, she believed that dawn would come, and they would face it together. The TV presenter, watching the broadcast, exhaled heavily. He admitted that a part of him felt it might have been easier to simply give in, to nobly sacrifice himself. But seeing the heroes below, he couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of awe. From the battlefield, the wounded dragon, still breathing despite the loss of his legs, gazed at the gathered heroes and asked sarcastically if they had all come just to serve themselves up as food to the monster. Senior met his gaze head-on, defiance burning in her eyes. "Do you have a better plan?" she asked sharply. The dragon turned toward the monster and nodded. He asked everyone to clear the area. He didn't want to hurt them in what he was about to do. As they stepped back, he began forming a powerful wind blast technique in his palm. Being a clone, Michael didn't fear death, but he still didn't want this to be his end. Senior kept a close eye on him, trying to discern what he was planning. Standing next to her, Adam explained that ranged attacks were futile. The monster's skeleton was buried too deep. The only way to kill it was for someone to get close and strike directly at its core. Once the wind blast was ready, the dragon launched himself at the monster at high speed. The technique generated violent currents of air, slicing through the surrounding area like blades. Wounds covered his body, but he didn't stop. Then, impact. A terrible explosion shook the battlefield, and hurricane-force winds blew out from the center in all directions. Senior shielded her face from the debris. The hero of hot and sour noodles did the same, momentarily blinded by dust and stone. When the smoke began to clear, they looked toward the center of the blast. But there was nothing. Only thick columns of smoke remained. No movement. No sign of the dragon. The TV presenter shot to his feet, stunned. No one had expected this. The dragon had given his life to destroy the monster. Even after losing both legs, he had fought to the very end. A true hero. Tears welled up in Valeria's eyes. She felt joy, relief, and sorrow. Silently, she thanked the dragon for giving them a new dawn. Elsewhere, Michael created another clone and appointed it as the new dragon. He confirmed the clone would retain all of the same elemental powers: earth, water, fire, and air. The clone simply nodded and promised to carry out his mission. Two judges stood atop a tall building, watching the sunrise. They waited patiently for the moment when it would be their turn to take the stage. Back on the battlefield, Gilbert had returned. He scanned the wreckage, looking for any signs of the monster's remnants. He needed to be sure it was completely destroyed. That's when he saw it. Hovering just above the ground was a glowing blue stone. Its light shimmered, hypnotic and otherworldly. An irresistible urge to possess it surged through Gilbert. He stepped forward, hand outstretched. But a voice rang out behind him. Ordinary people are not allowed to touch that. Before he could react, Gilbert felt a sharp, cold pain. A weapon had pierced straight through his body. His eyes widened in shock. He looked down. His armor had not been breached. The alarm systems hadn't even activated. Somehow, the enemy had bypassed all his defenses. Behind him stood Mr. X, his expression filled with disappointment. He pulled his blade free and muttered, "Heroes these days rely far too much on magical enlightenment." The TV presenter watching was stunned. Where had this stranger come from? How had he gotten so close to Gilbert, one of the most well-defended mechanical heroes, and landed a blow without being seen? Gilbert stumbled back, trying to get some distance. Holding his wound, he demanded, "Who are you? How did you injure me?" As he moved, he saw Mr. X slowly bending down, reaching for the glowing blue stone. Mr. X responded coldly, stating that the mechanical hero had simply been too weak to sense the danger right behind him. Just as he extended his hand to take the glowing blue stone, something unexpected happened. Michael swooped in from above and snatched the stone away in the blink of an eye. Now floating mid-air, Michael held the radiant blue stone in his hand and stared down at the stranger in the wide-brimmed hat. This stone, he declared, now belongs to the judge's organization. The moment the main character appeared at the heart of the crisis, a joyful smile broke across the TV presenter's face. He firmly believed that with Michael and Rooster working together, they might finally break through the chaos and reach a peaceful future. The audience watching the broadcast erupted in cheers, voicing their support for their new idol. Looking up at Michael, Mr. X spoke calmly. He claimed that Neva's organization had no desire to feud with the judges and suggested that, to avoid unnecessary conflict, Michael should return the blue stone to its rightful owners. Meanwhile, a cameraman who had just arrived at the scene glanced at his equipment in confusion. Strange, he muttered, the camera isn't recording anymore. He assumed it was a technical failure. But Valeria, examining one of the nearby drones that had landed and gone inactive, disagreed. She suspected it wasn't mechanical failure at all, but rather some kind of spiritual interference. Michael, overhearing their conversation, quickly pieced it together. Mr. X had disabled the recording equipment on purpose, not wanting his actions to be exposed. It was a calculated move, one that hinted at a much larger objective. He turned to Mr. X and asked, "What if I do want to declare war on Neva's organization?" With a sudden burst of speed, Mr. X lunged forward, blade raised to strike. "If you desire death so much," he shouted, "then I'll be happy to grant it." Just as the blade was about to reach him, Michael activated a spiritual explosion. In an instant, Mr. X's weapon disintegrated mid-air. Shocked, he jumped back. His eyes narrowed. "Our leader reached the third stage 15 years ago," he muttered. "He said our dark blue trump card was the only one capable of breaking the human limit. I didn't think there were others out there, but you..." His words made Michael pause. He recalled Lucia's strange spiritual particles and began to suspect a connection to this so-called dark blue race. If he wanted to save his sister, he would need to learn everything about them. Adjusting his hat, Mr. X straightened up and said with a calm but firm tone, "I'd love to fight you properly, but I've been assigned to an urgent mission." He turned to leave, offering a final remark. "Take care of the stone until we meet again." But Michael wasn't about to let him go. Suddenly, Mr. X froze in place, unable to take another step. Before he could even turn around, a powerful spiritual blast struck him in the back, launching him several meters forward. Gritting his teeth, he summoned a spiritual shield to block the next attack. But deep down, he knew the truth: this boy was too strong. His shield wouldn't hold for long. And it didn't. Michael's next strike pierced his shoulder cleanly. Mr. X fell to the ground, swearing in pain. The blade Michael had used dissolved immediately after the blow, and he stood towering above the fallen man. "You're now a prisoner of the judge's organization," Michael said coldly. The damage was too severe. Michael stepped closer and asked, "How do you feel about this now?" Grimacing, Mr. X shouted, "Fine. I admit defeat. If you're going to kill me, then go ahead, do it." Michael leaned in slightly. "That depends. If you answer my questions obediently, I'll let you live." Without waiting for permission, Michael launched his interrogation. "Tell me, how is the ice adventurer connected to that blue thing?" Mr. X hesitated, then finally spoke in a low voice. "It won't matter if I tell you about the elemental particles." He explained that the spiritual bodies of the dark blue race typically contain a high concentration of these particles. Ever since the start of the period of changes, these blue elements had begun slowly transforming the souls of their carriers. Over time, strange sprouts would emerge from their bodies. These sprouts act like sensors, tracking down areas of light, which are essential to eventually obtaining the soul of a full-blooded member of the race. The stronger the spiritual power of the host, the denser the particles become, allowing the sprouts to grow. The more stable these sprouts are, the more power a person can absorb, unlocking advanced techniques or new combat abilities. Currently, the dark blue race was actively distributing blue pills to locate suitable bodies for spiritual migration. But as the ice adventurer's fate had shown, not everyone could withstand the transformation when the particles activated. Grabbing Mr. X by the lapels, Michael's voice trembled slightly. "Can someone infected with these particles be cured?" Mr. X blinked, surprised by the question. Why are you interested in something like that? But just a few moments later, Mr. X figured it out on his own. A cruel, mocking smile crossed his face as he asked, "Is there someone among the test subjects that you care about deeply, Michael?" Michael didn't answer. Instead, he unleashed several spiritual blades at the man in a swift, merciless attack. Mr. X narrowly dodged them at the last second. But as he moved to safety, a strange blue energy began to surge from his body. Michael's expression darkened. He cursed loudly, realizing what had just happened. The creature that had been controlling Mr. X had fled. The man's body went limp and collapsed to the ground. White steam began to rise from his form. Then, to everyone's shock, his physical appearance began to change. Michael's eyes widened under his mask. Gilbert, who was standing nearby, froze in disbelief as well. The figure of Mr. X evaporated completely, and in his place lay an unconscious woman. And not just any woman, this was none other than the head of the Hero Association in their city. Michael clicked his tongue in disgust. So, Neva's organization has already infiltrated the very top of the association, he muttered grimly. Gilbert stepped forward, clearly disturbed but trying to stay composed. Regarding the accusation of Headmistress Olivia's murder, he said, "I can testify on behalf of the judge's organization. As compensation for the injury to the dragon." Enraged, Michael grabbed him by the collar and shouted, "Do you really think you can brush this off with a few words?" His voice trembled with fury. "Do you have any idea how hard it is to raise someone with 4 abilities at once?" Gilbert held his ground and asked, "Then what do you want from me?" Michael released him and answered, "I want the mechanical hero to step down and let Austin succeed the Olympus company." A nervous smile appeared on Gilbert's face. "I can name my son as my heir, but only if he reaches A rank. Without that, the others will never support the decision." Ascending into the air on his spiritual shield, Michael replied with certainty, "That won't be a problem. Once Austin becomes an A-rank hero, he'll take his place as the heir of Olympus." Without another word, he soared off. Mid-flight, Michael created a spiritual clone and transformed it into the serpent. He commanded it to take care of the problems related to Alexa, while he made his way to the hospital to check on his sister. The serpent nodded silently and moved swiftly to fulfill the order. As Michael flew, thoughts weighed heavily on his mind. After the ice adventurer's death, some strange spiritual wave had been released. He needed to make sure Lucia was safe. Meanwhile, Gilbert returned to his office and immediately called an emergency meeting with everyone who had witnessed the earlier events. Staring out the window, he said solemnly, "All of you saw what happened with your own eyes. Headmistress Olivia had been infected, which means she may have been a spy for the organization responsible for the Ice Adventurer's mutation." He turned to face them. "That's why I'm asking each of you to cooperate fully with the Hero Association's investigation." Senior and Adam exchanged glances and nodded. "We'll do everything we can." The trio began to head for the door, but before they could leave, Gilbert called out to his son, "Austin, stay a moment." The young man stopped and turned around, clearly exhausted. "What is it?" Gilbert walked over, placed a hand on his son's shoulder, and said, "I've made a deal with Rooster. He wants you to become the next head of the Olympus company. That means you'll need to earn an A-rank ability, no matter what it takes." He ruffled Austin's hair gently and added, "I'm counting on you, son." But Austin shrugged his hand off and scowled. "This will only make things worse between me and my brother." His voice hardened. "My goal is to become one of the judges, one of the Zodiac, to fulfill the will of the dragon." Looking his father in the eyes, he added bitterly, "My godfather opened a path to a bright future for me. But you? You've done nothing but chain me to family errands. I won't waste my talent running errands anymore." Gilbert stared at his son in silence. His expression grew heavy. He realized, perhaps too late, how much his children had grown, how far apart they now stood. Unable to contain his emotions, the mechanical hero hugged his son tightly. "I didn't even realize how much you've all grown," he whispered. Austin struggled in his grasp. "Let go already," he shouted, clearly embarrassed and frustrated. At that same moment, in a quiet alley far from the chaos, Alexa sat slumped against the wall of a house, clearly worn out. Suddenly, a shadow approached. A hand extended toward her. She looked up in surprise. It was the serpent, offering her help. But Alexa, eyes filled with fatigue and confusion, shook her head. Alexa shook her head and replied that she could handle it on her own. Gripping her sword tightly, she tried to lift herself up from the ground, using it for support. But her weapon couldn't withstand the pressure, its blade slipped out from beneath her, and she collapsed once again onto the cold pavement. Her strength was gone. With her body trembling from exhaustion, the weight of everything she had held back finally came crashing down. Tears welled up in her eyes and spilled over uncontrollably. Covering her face with her palms, she sobbed and whispered an apology to the serpent for the death of the dragon, for everything that had gone wrong because of her. The serpent knelt beside her and gently stroked her head. "It wasn't your fault," he said softly. "None of this was. That's why the judges sent me, to bring you back. Come with me." After a long silence, Alexa nodded weakly and reached out. He helped her to her feet, and the two of them disappeared into the distance. Meanwhile, Michael had already arrived at the hospital. His worst fears were confirmed. A strange dome of energy now surrounded the entire building. Descending to the ground, he made his way inside, strangely unhindered. But once he passed through the doors, an eerie silence settled over everything. No nurses. No doctors. No staff. The halls were completely empty. Then, just ahead of him, a thick energy began to form, dense and shimmering like a curtain of light. From this mist, grotesque, zombie-like figures began to emerge. Michael stepped back in shock as he recognized them. These were victims from the department store incident. But now, clad in dark blue hospital uniforms, they had been twisted into something else entirely. Suddenly, he felt a cold touch on his shoulder. Spinning around, he came face to face with one of the creatures, its jaws gaping open, ready to attack. Without flinching, Michael grabbed the monster's glowing blue arm, twisted it over his shoulder, and slammed it to the floor. Then, with a single, crushing punch to the chest, he ended it. He reached for his spiritual blade. Within seconds, he cut down every last creature in the corridor. As he stood over their lifeless bodies, he prayed, "Please don't let Lucia be one of them." Without wasting another second, he hurled his blade toward a security camera, destroying it. Then he sprinted through the hospital, finding his sister's room in moments. What he saw inside made his heart stop. Blue energy bubbles filled the room, and in the center of them floated his sister, Lucia, her body glowing with a ghostly blue light. She was suspended in the air, nearly transparent, with strange appendages beginning to burst out of her back. It was just as Mr. X had described. Lucia was mutating. Panic rising in his chest, Michael called out to her. "Lucia! Don't give in. You can fight it." The glow began to flicker. Her face twisted in agony. A terrible scream tore from her throat as her body slowly began to return to normal. The appendages vanished, her glow faded, and at last, she drifted gently down onto the bed. Lucia clutched her chest in silence. Her scream stopped. Her hair, once a soft golden wheat, had turned pitch black. Michael rushed to her side, checking her breathing anxiously. Her eyes fluttered open, heterochromatic as always, filled with confusion as they settled on him. She sat up in bed in a flash. A spiritual dagger formed in her palm, and she pressed the blade to his throat. "Who are you?" she demanded. "What are you doing here?" Michael raised both hands in surrender. "It's me." "Your brother," he said carefully. But Lucia narrowed her eyes. "Nice try. My brother's voice is completely different." With a resigned sigh, Michael dropped his disguise. His form shifted back to normal. Still, the suspicion didn't fade from her eyes. "You're not him," she said. "My brother can't transform like that." Michael adjusted his glasses and gave her a small smile. "Remember when you were 7? You wet the bed and were so scared our parents would find out, you woke me up and asked me to sleep next to you. Then you blamed it all on me." Lucia blinked in shock. Her weapon vanished instantly. With a sheepish smile, she looked at him. "When did you learn to transform like that?" Michael gently took her hand. "I'll explain everything. But first, we need to get out of here." Later, after they returned home, Lucia immediately went to take a long shower. Valeria had also made it home by then, exhausted from the night's chaos. She was in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. Michael stepped up behind her and wrapped his arms around her in a grateful hug. "Thanks for all this." She turned to face him and smiled warmly, throwing her arms around his neck. "Well, there's a good reason." Lucia's finally awake. But then her smile faded slightly. She looked down. "Today, at work, I realized something," she said quietly. "How truly powerless a person can be when faced with the unknown." Valeria couldn't stop thinking about the dragon. The image of that powerful, noble warrior giving his life in a selfless battle still haunted her. His death had left a scar on her heart. But as she raised her gaze and looked at Michael standing beside her, she managed a soft smile. "If there's anything this tragedy taught me," she whispered, "it's that I should treasure the people I love even more." A warm, romantic atmosphere settled in the kitchen. Michael didn't take his eyes off her. The emotion in her voice, the sincerity in her expression, it pulled him in. When Valeria leaned closer for a kiss, a soft smile crossed his lips, and he slowly leaned in to meet her. They didn't notice the approaching footsteps, nor did they hear the cheerful voice echoing down the hall. "I'm done with my shower. I'm starving." Lucia's sudden entrance made Valeria flinch in surprise. She quickly shoved Michael away and blurted out, "Everything's ready. Let's eat." Michael let out a chuckle as he helped Valeria bring the dishes to the table. He laid out the chopsticks while she served the food. Lucia's eyes sparkled as she looked at the table. "All my favorites," she cried joyfully. "Valeria, this is amazing." "Thank you." Without wasting a moment, she plopped into her seat and happily began devouring the chicken legs. Her joy was infectious, and as she chewed with delight, Michael and Valeria watched her with soft smiles. Seeing her like that, so carefree, so full of life, Michael felt a strong surge of emotion. "If I could protect this moment forever, I'd give anything." An hour later, Michael quietly called Lucia into his room. Once inside, he got serious. "We're not telling Mom and Dad that you're awake." "Not yet." Lucia looked uncertain. "But is that really necessary?" Michael folded his arms. "The Hero Association is investigating mutation cases at the hospital. If they know you're alive, they'll come after you. It's safer if they think you're dead." Lucia hesitated, then slowly nodded. "Okay. But Michael, you don't have to carry everything alone. I'm here to help you too." Michael looked down, guilt weighing heavy on his heart. "If I'd been stronger, I could have protected you. Instead, I dragged you into a world you never asked for." But Lucia shook her head and smiled. "It's okay. I learned a lot." Then, summoning a glowing blade in her palm, she added, "This weapon doesn't just cut, it attacks an enemy's mind directly." She reached out and held her brother's hand. "Michael, I want you to use your human control ability on me." He stared at her, stunned. "My health is better," she continued. "But I can still feel it. The dark blue race, they left something in my mind. If you don't act now, they might be able to control me again." Michael nodded solemnly and gently touched her cheek. "Your body is different now. But to protect you, I'll need to upgrade my ability to S rank." He materialized an ability pearl in his palm and began channeling dark energy into it. Minutes passed in silence until a system message flashed before his eyes. "Ability upgrade complete. Human control, S rank, effect, can now brainwash A rank and lower targets, fully subjugating their will for up to 30 years. Spiritual form can also enter the target and extract 6 hours of life force." Without delay, he activated the ability and used it on Lucia, who sat quietly before him. Closing his eyes, Michael focused. But this time, it was different. A strange scene unfolded in his mind, a slow-moving current of water, from which a small tree sprouted and began to grow. As the tree stretched upward, a mysterious voice echoed around him. "Who's there?" he called out. No answer. Then, something yanked him downward, dragging him into the depths. The voice laughed, filled with sorrow and darkness. Just another dismal find, Michael snapped back to reality with a gasp. Terror clutched his heart. Someone, or something, had nearly broken his spiritual defenses. Lucia noticed his pale expression and rushed over. "Michael! Are you okay?" He slowly pulled her hand away from his face. "There's something I need you to do." At that moment, Valeria peeked into the room. "Want some fruit?" Michael looked at her and smiled gently. "Yeah, something light sounds good." Lucia chose to stay in the room, and Michael returned to the kitchen with Valeria. As she settled at her laptop, he asked casually, "What are you working on?" "I got offered a new position," she replied, glancing back at him. "It's because of how well I performed during the last mission." Michael's expression tightened. "Will it be dangerous?" Valeria chuckled softly. "Don't worry. This time I'll just be broadcasting from a special booth. No field work." Relieved, Michael stood and stepped behind her. As she typed, he gently took her hand and discreetly passed her a glowing ability pearl. Valeria blinked in surprise and turned to him. What's this? The ability Michael passed to Valeria was called Green Snake Chain. It was a dual-purpose skill. In moments of danger, it would automatically form a defensive barrier around the user, while simultaneously transforming into a green snake to strike back at the attacker. A blend of protection and offense, just what she needed. Meanwhile, Alex, accompanied by Sakura and Anna, made her way to a hot spring. Sakura explained that these waters were known for their restorative properties, especially after exhausting night battles. Curious, Alex dipped her hands into the warm water, her expression skeptical. She scooped some into her palms and frowned. Was it really that miraculous? Soon after, she rose to her feet. Looking at her companions, Alex informed them she couldn't stay long. Her organization was still on the move and would be expecting her. Coming ashore, she laid out a rug and rested on it, her mind already turning to what sort of mission might await her next. Anna looked at her with admiration. "You're redoing a great job staying off the radar," she said with a smile. Moments later, Alex's consciousness was pulled into the Heavenly Palace, a virtual coordination hub, where Michael and the others were already waiting. Michael addressed her directly. "Have you heard of the Four Seas territory?" he asked. He explained that her next mission was to investigate that region and gather intel on the Dark Blue race. If she succeeded, she would earn her place as the 28th member of their organization. Without hesitation, Alexa bent down on one knee. "I will depart immediately," she replied. Michael gave a small, satisfied smile. His fabricated story had worked. Alexa believed this was a test mission, and now the team finally had a truly powerful member to rely on. Raising a hand, Michael added, "Before you go, visit the Florence family. Fully replenish your strength first. Only then may you begin the mission." A happy, confident smile crossed Alexa's face. She bowed low. "Understood. I will give this mission everything I have." And with that, she vanished from the Heavenly Palace. A moment later, a voice spoke up. "Can I say something now?" It was Rabbit, Michael's sister. He gave her a nod. Without holding back her excitement, Rabbit shouted, "That was Alexa." "The Alexa?" "One of the actual Knights of the Round Table. I saw her up close. Do you think next time I could ask for her autograph?" Michael sighed heavily. Now it made sense why she had been so quiet earlier. She had met her idol. Placing a firm hand on her shoulder, he looked at her and said, "Your name is Rabbit now. And you must be extremely careful. No one can know who you really are." But it was like she hadn't heard a word. The moment he let go, she happily declared, "I'll definitely work closely with Alexa after this mission. That'll give me a better chance to get her autograph." Michael was speechless. She was focused on all the wrong things. Sigh. He could already tell it would take a long time to get her to understand this wasn't some kind of game. Suddenly, Rabbit looked up. "So, what are you going to do next?" Michael's expression hardened. "I have a plan." He explained that the Knights of the Round Table Company had ties to the Dark Blue race. To investigate, he assigned several people their missions. The hero of sour and spicy noodles and Oscar would work together to dig into the company's secrets. Alexa would continue her reconnaissance across the Four Seas. Meanwhile, Lucas was tasked with infiltrating the Hero Association and rising to the top, becoming a hidden trump card, a black horse under the judge's command. But before any of that, Michael had one more thing to do: visit an old friend. Later that night, Lucas sat quietly on a bench near a small park, a bottle of water in his hand and a tired look on his face. Behind him, a familiar voice called out, "You've been pushing yourself too hard." Startled, Lucas turned, but relaxed as he saw who it was. "Michael," he said with a smile. "It's been a while." Michael placed a hand on the young man's shoulder. "How have you been holding up?" Lucas looked away. "Not great. I still can't fully awaken my ability. My body is only 7 times stronger than a normal human's." Michael raised an eyebrow in surprise. 7 times? That's impressive. When someone reaches 10, they're already knocking on A-rank's door. He gave the boy a reassuring pat on the back. "You're doing great. Don't pressure yourself. Just grow at your own pace." With that, Michael turned to leave. "Oh, and Lucas." He paused without turning around. "I know you'll win this year's World Hero Championship." Lucas grinned and stood up straighter. "I'll give it everything I've got, for the sake of the organization." But Michael simply raised a hand to silence him. He didn't look back. The danger was imminent, and Michael knew that to prevent any possible harm, he would need to use his human control skill on Lucas. With a firm nod, Lucas agreed, prepared for whatever Michael had planned. A few moments later, Michael took control of Lucas's body. Meanwhile, not far from where they were, an intense battle was unfolding. The men the girl had been fighting with were closing in on her. One of them sneered, accusing her of meddling where she shouldn't have. He warned that Firecloud CL, his organization, would never let her actions go unpunished. In response, the girl questioned in disbelief, since when did responding to ordinary people's letters become business? But she didn't have time to finish her thought, as she noticed a blob of dark energy speeding toward her. She swiftly sidestepped, dodging the attack just in time. Her instincts kicked in, and she lunged at the large man with horns, her blade aiming for him. Before he could react, part of his horn was shattered. As purple liquid began to pour from the injury, he realized she had poisoned him. But before he could make a move, an explosion erupted nearby. The man, hiding behind his partner, staggered backward, struggling to shield himself from the powerful gust of wind. As he regained his balance, he felt another impending threat. Turning just in time, he barely avoided a beam of light, which slammed into the ground where he had just stood. Stunned, he looked at the girl in confusion, asking how it was possible for someone to wield so many elements simultaneously. With a casual smirk, Alice threw her gun over her shoulder and answered, "You could try to guess. If you get it right, I might share the secret with you." Irritated, the man began to emanate a grey mist from his body. But before he could act, he suddenly felt a boot slam into his face, knocked out cold by Lucas's kick. He looked at Alice, standing a bit off to the side, and warned, "If you cause another explosion, this place will be finished. And in 5 days, the entrance exams at B University will be held here." Alice paused, sizing up Lucas. His swift takedown of a C-rank opponent made her think that this boy must be at least a B rank, or even higher. She stepped forward and extended her hand to him, introducing herself. "My name is Alice. If things work out, maybe we'll meet again at the entrance exams. We could even be partners." Lucas, taking her hand, nodded. "If we end up on the same team, so be it." As they shook hands, Alice tried to squeeze Lucas's hand to test his reaction, but he didn't flinch. Surprised by his lack of response, she smiled sweetly and asked, "How about we grab dinner together tonight?" Lucas, unsure how to respond, glanced nervously at Michael, who was still controlling his body. Michael, sensing the awkwardness, intervened and advised, "Lucas, calm down. You don't need to overthink this." He then took back full control of Lucas's body, cleared his throat, and said, "I've got some things to do at home. I'll have to pass on dinner today." Without waiting for a response, he quickly pulled his hand out of Alice's grasp and walked away. Alice stood there in surprise, watching as he left. She'd never had anyone refuse dinner with her before. Meanwhile, Michael, still controlling Lucas, whispered in his ear, "Never forget, Lucas, don't get distracted by girls. Focus on your goals. Remember your sister." Lucas, now back in full control of his body, nodded gratefully, thanking Michael for his guidance. 5 days later, the bustling atmosphere around B University was palpable as many people gathered for the entrance exams. The first to arrive were the team of reporters. Veronica, one of the main commentators, greeted the crowd with excitement. "Welcome, everyone. Today, I'll be your commentator, and I'm thrilled to introduce my new partner, Valeria." Veronica continued with a wink. "You're all here to witness the entrance exams, but don't get too comfortable. It may seem simple, just complete the assigned tasks within a set time using any abilities you have. But what you don't know is that the organizers have prepared plenty of traps and obstacles for the participants." Valeria took over, adding, "The rules themselves are simple enough, but expect to face plenty of surprises. It won't be a walk in the park." In the meantime, Lucas, alongside the other participants, was already at the venue, waiting for the start. As he stood there, Ethan approached and threw an arm over his shoulder, eyeing him with curiosity. "Do you have some abilities that enhance your physical strength?" he asked, noticing that Lucas didn't seem to be using any transport. "I also noticed you're not wearing windproof glasses. Is there a reason?" Lucas shook his head. "I don't need any of that. I just have good speed and don't require the glasses." The entrance exams were about to begin, and everything was set. The participants were ready, but none of them could predict just how intense and unpredictable the tests would become. Ethan grinned widely, clearly excited about the day's events. He mentioned that it was going to be an interesting day, especially since he had heard that even the S-rank Purple Panther had been invited. Alice Wilson, an A-rank fighter, was also present. However, before Ethan could continue, Lucas interrupted him. As the boys looked up, they saw Alice standing before them, dressed in a sports uniform and smiling. She greeted Lucas, saying that she had been looking forward to this meeting. Alice reminded him that they had agreed to work together, and now, they would be on the same team. Suddenly, Ethan stepped in between them, his usual playful grin on his face. He boasted that he, too, had speed abilities, and if Alice had been paired with him, they would have easily completed the task. Alice, however, just snorted in displeasure, dismissing Ethan as just another user of the common physical enhancement abilities. She had no interest in him whatsoever. Lucas couldn't help but look at his friend in surprise as Ethan's heart seemed to shatter into pieces. A few minutes later, a loud warning echoed through the air. The exam was about to begin. All participants were instructed to take their places and prepare for the start. As the countdown began, many participants used cars for transport, but Lucas was among the few who believed in his physical abilities and chose to run without a vehicle. When the countdown reached 0, the test officially began with a loud gunshot. Immediately, most of the participants took to the skies, surprising the spectators below. One of them, soaring above the crowd, looked down with a smug smile. He boasted that those who could fly were invincible, easily outrunning those in cars. But he didn't notice the unexpected obstacle in his path, a flying goose. The bird began pecking at him relentlessly, throwing him off course. Moments later, more geese appeared, circling and targeting their next victims. Veronica, watching from her seat, commented that if flying were so easy, many would bring flying machines to the race. Turning to Valeria, she asked if she recognized these creatures. Valeria nodded, confirming that the geese were B-rank summoned creatures. Veronica watched as the aerial participants dropped out one by one, and soon, the cars were leading the race. As one car sped ahead, the driver shouted confidently, claiming this would be the easiest driving test. However, a black car quickly caught up, and the drivers raced full throttle, oblivious to the hazards in front of them. In their heated competition, one of the organizers stepped in their path, raising a hand and blowing a whistle, signaling them to stop. The driver of the black car cursed loudly as a wall of bubbles appeared in front of him, blocking his way. The organizer reprimanded the racers, reminding them that heroes should always prioritize saving people and adhering to the rules. Just then, Ethan dashed past the scene, chuckling at the mess the racers had found themselves in. But in his distraction, he failed to notice the old man ahead. The two collided, sending them both flying in opposite directions. The old man hit the ground hard, blood oozing from his nose and mouth. Ethan, shaken, jumped to his feet, horrified. He had not expected such serious injuries from such a minor collision. Two more participants ran past, deciding to avoid getting involved. Ethan, eager to leave without drawing attention, slowly backed away. However, the old man, now standing, shouted at him angrily, accusing him of lacking any conscience for leaving after causing the injury. Despite the commotion, Lucas continued forward without hesitation, jumping across rooftops effortlessly. Alice, who had been holding onto her craft, landed next to him. She glanced at him, clearly impressed by his agility. Lucas looked back at her and commented on how much effort the university had put into organizing this exam, even going so far as to use illusion magic to enhance the challenge. Alice raised an eyebrow in surprise and asked if he meant that the old man they had just encountered was an illusion. Lucas nodded, preparing for another leap, and warned her that they would soon encounter two more participants blocking their way. Alice eagerly responded that she was truly looking forward to the next test. As she gazed in the direction Lucas had pointed out, she noticed two figures, just as Lucas had warned her. One of the men was holding a hammer. Valeria, also observing the duo, asked who they were, as she would have recognized them immediately if they were heroes. Veronica, suppressing a chuckle, explained that, according to the information they had, these two were not students at University B. Mentors had already been dispatched to deal with them, should it be necessary. This test was meant to evaluate participants comprehensively, and some challenges could prove dangerous. Meanwhile, the director of the university called one of the new teachers, Sean, into his office. With a relaxed smile, Sean reassured the director that there was no need to worry, he would handle the two troublemakers without issue. One of the men, standing atop a nearby roof, shouted down at Lucas and Alice, announcing that they were about to experience the true power of a B-rank hero. In an instant, he began to transform, his facial features sharpening and a tail sprouting. He rested his hands on the roof and meowed loudly. Alice found this scene unexpectedly adorable and couldn't help but delight in it. Lucas, however, didn't share her sentiments. He turned his gaze toward the transformed man and calmly stated that he would handle him, leaving Alice to deal with the other. Without waiting, Lucas leaped forward, charging toward his opponent. Inside his mind, Michael, who had taken control of his body, advised Lucas to feel every muscle and bone move before harnessing his strength fully. His opponent, Finn, wasn't about to wait and immediately jumped at Lucas. In response, Lucas reacted quickly, landing a powerful punch to Finn's stomach. The sickening sound of broken bones echoed, and blood gushed from Finn's mouth. He was utterly stunned. Finn, a strong and fast fighter, had never expected to be so easily defeated. Lucas was surprised too, having initially thought Finn was more formidable. It turned out Finn's resistance and endurance were lacking. As Lucas stood over Finn, extending a hand in concern, Finn angrily shouted that Lucas had gone too far. Just as Lucas was about to speak, a fiery ball shot toward him. Reacting swiftly, Lucas jumped back just in time to avoid the explosion. The second attacker, wielding a large hammer, swung it fiercely, hurling fiery clots at Alice. She deftly avoided the attacks, but as the flames increased in number, she created a fire extinguisher cylinder, putting out the fires with ease. Lucas, impressed by her quick thinking, noted how incredibly useful her ability to create items was. If she could make equipment, they would be unstoppable. After the smoke cleared, Lucas realized that the opponent he had been fighting had disappeared. But before he could react, he saw movement from the side. Throwing Finn over his shoulder, the second attacker began to flee, realizing he couldn't win. By this time, Valeria had gathered enough information about the attackers. She informed the viewers that the two men were part of the Fire Cloud Society. One of them, who had the ability to transform, had been easily defeated by Lucas with just one blow. Veronica, sitting next to Valeria, eagerly exclaimed to the audience that they should all take notice of Lucas. She predicted that this boy might soon become a super strong hero, deserving of gifts for his impressive display of strength. The defeated attackers didn't get far, though. As soon as they thought they were safe, Sean appeared before them. With a cold gaze, he declared that anyone who dared harm his students would have to pay the full price for it. Meanwhile, Lucas and Alice had already reached the finish line. Alice looked up at the massive screen and sighed in disappointment when she saw that they had secured 14th and 15th place. A nearby competitor tried to reassure her, saying that their battle performance would be enough to get noticed. Alice smiled in satisfaction, nodding in agreement. At that moment, Michael's voice resonated in Lucas's mind, telling him that it was time for him to go. Lucas looked ahead, his expression serious, and replied that everything was fine, he could handle things from here on out. Far from the university, a blue clot of energy shot through the air, traveling across a vast distance until it reached a small, uninhabited island in the middle of the sea. The clot descended into a cave, moving toward the deserted room at its center. There, a cloaked stranger stood beneath a mass of blue tentacles hanging from the ceiling. The clot landed before him and transformed into a blue monster, its eyes glinting ominously. The cloaked figure, his face hidden, grinned as he revealed a significant piece of information. With a subtle nod of approval, he told the others that a hero from the Judge organization had reached the 3rd level of spiritual power. Something intriguing, he implied, was brewing. The following morning, Lucia reported to her brother, Michael, that she had experienced something unusual. She had briefly seen several dark blue shoots awaken, though only for a few seconds. Michael, shocked, asked in disbelief if she had truly been able to see through other people's eyes. Lucia confirmed it, mentioning that she had only succeeded 3 times, and each time involved a representative of the dark blue race. Opening his laptop, Michael inquired if she could remember the locations she had seen. After a brief pause, Lucia recalled the 3 places. The first was a large white tower in the 2nd region, the second was a clubhouse, and the third was inside a mansion. Michael began searching for similarities and, after a few minutes, he called out in triumph. He had found the clubhouse. He asked Lucia to verify if it was the same place. Moving closer, Lucia confirmed that it was indeed the location. She had seen people from the dark blue race visit there to get their nails or hair done. Michael furrowed his brows, his mind racing. He recalled that among the leadership of the Knights of the Round Table, there was a girl who owned half of their shares but possessed no known abilities. Lucia continued, describing the 3rd location. She remembered seeing a lawn, a fountain, and some antiques, but nothing else stood out. Fatigued, she collapsed onto her bed, lamenting that she didn't understand anything. Suddenly, an idea struck her, and she suggested to Michael that he use his ability to enter her mind and review all her memories himself. Meanwhile, a significant family meeting was taking place at Olympus. Gilbert sat, his hands clasped thoughtfully, contemplating the best way to present the information to his eldest son. After a long sigh, he finally spoke. He had gathered them there to announce something important. Looking at Edgar, he declared that Edgar would take his place in the heroic union, and Austin would be entrusted with running the company. Austin, tense, watched his brother closely, waiting for his reaction. Contrary to his expectations, Edgar seemed relieved, even joyful, at the news. He praised his father for recognizing Austin's talent, stating that his brother was far better suited for the role. However, Edgar's expression quickly grew serious. He clarified that his only ambition was to become the strongest hero. Gilbert, frowning, acknowledged Edgar's grudge against the Judge organization but felt it was necessary to reveal a truth. With a serious glance, he asked if Edgar knew why the members of the organization were so strong. Edgar, dismissing the idea, assumed it was simply the result of hard work and innate talent. Gilbert shook his head. He explained that Edgar was mistaken. The members of the Judge organization had access to special technology and equipment that allowed them to create an elixir of abilities. But more importantly, they were aided by forces from another world. Back with Lucia, Michael followed through on her request and entered her memories. He scrolled through everything until he found what she had seen. With this new information, he wasted no time. Transforming into the attire of the judges, Michael and Lucia made their way to the House of Firearms. Upon their arrival, Michael instructed Lucia to stand aside. She, however, was not pleased with this. Confused, she asked why he had brought her along only to make her an observer. Michael reached out, gently ruffling her hair, and calmed her down. Lucia, in response, laughed, teasing her brother. She told him that she knew he was strong, not because of his abilities, but because of his acting skills. Inside the house, the man who owned the property sat calmly sipping tea in his garden. Noticing the stranger's presence, he smiled and asked why they had arrived uninvited. Michael descended, releasing his shadows to destroy a nearby statue, sending it crashing toward the man's table. The man, however, easily dodged the attack, and when one of Michael's shadows rushed at him, the man landed in front of Michael. He smiled again, commenting that he had heard an interesting rumor, that the Judge organization helps the dead and that Florence's family supports them in this. This revelation caused Michael to tense up. He couldn't understand where this rumor had come from or why it was spreading so rapidly. Meanwhile, the man stood up and, with a questioning glance, asked if the judges could truly return the soul to a dead person's body. Michael, unfazed, responded that the dark blue race had made significant progress in understanding the spiritual component. He then shrugged, clearly disappointed, and commented that the answer was always the same. With a swift motion, the man pulled out a gun, pointing it directly at Michael. Without hesitation, he fired, declaring that since Michael couldn't provide any useful information, he was no longer needed. As the bullet sped toward Michael, he activated his clone ability, summoning a dozen shadow clones. The bullet struck one of them, passing straight through it, but it didn't stop there. The bullet shifted its trajectory, heading for the next clone. Michael analyzed the situation, noting that while the gun had homing capabilities, its speed was slow, meaning it would take too much time to redirect between clones. George, realizing this as well, fired at several clones simultaneously, making it harder for Michael to dodge. Taking advantage of the distraction, Michael approached George from behind, sword in hand, warning him to be more cautious. When George turned around, a satisfied smile played across his face. Before Michael could react, an explosion echoed across the garden. The clones, quick to respond, jumped back to safety, avoiding the blast. George, however, who was at the epicenter of the explosion, survived, but he was horrified when an icy stream of air suddenly rushed toward him. His hand rapidly froze over. Lucia, perched on her ice throne, chuckled quietly at the sight of George's distress. Panicked, George screamed that while they had clearly outmatched him, fighting 2 against 1 wasn't fair. Desperate, he called over to a figure who had been standing unnoticed. A woman emerged from the shadows, a sword in her hands, and charged at Michael and Lucia. Michael, worried, cautioned his sister to be careful. Lucia nodded, creating an ice sword of her own. The 2 women clashed in battle, with Eliza putting all her strength into her attacks, but Lucia easily blocked each strike. After a brief exchange, Eliza leaped back, lowering her sword and asking if Lucia was also from the dark blue race. Lucia, not answering, leaped back onto her ice throne, floating in mid-air. Meanwhile, George aimed his gun at Michael, shouting that if he dared approach, he would die immediately. As he fired, Michael closed his eyes, deep in thought, trying to figure out the best way to deal with the homing bullets. The bullet grew closer, and just as it was about to strike, Michael had an idea. The next bullet flew straight for his head, but Michael dodged it just in time. The bullet instead embedded itself in a nearby tree trunk, piercing it through and igniting the wood in a fiery blaze. George, visibly frustrated, realized that Michael had already figured out how to counter his homing bullets. Meanwhile, Michael conjured an electric ball in his hand and charged toward George. At the same time, Rabbit rushed into the fray, charging toward Eliza. She skillfully dodged the electric ball, stepping aside just as it grazed her shoulder. When Rabbit engaged Eliza in battle, she summoned a shield to block his attack. Realizing that they couldn't win this way, George reached into his pocket, pulling out a handful of blue pills. Shouting that he wasn't going to give up so easily, he swallowed them all in one go. His body was immediately enveloped in a blue glow, and the hand that had been frozen by Lucia's attack began to heal. As his transformation continued, George's eyes and hair turned blue. Eliza, noticing the change, froze in horror. She rushed to her husband, desperately calling out to him. She reached him just in time to stop his transformation, creating a small blue stick in her palm and touching his forehead. She managed to bring him back to consciousness, explaining that his spiritual body couldn't handle such a large concentration of particles. If he hadn't stopped, he would have fully transformed into a dark blue being. With urgency, Eliza approached him and began absorbing the blue energy from his body. Michael, seeing the opportunity, summoned another electric ball in his palm. As the ball flew toward George, his eyes widened in shock. To protect his wife, he threw himself in front of her, taking the full force of the electric attack. George collapsed to the ground, the fight taking a dramatic turn. Eliza collapsed to the ground beside her husband, tears filling her eyes as she pulled him onto her lap. George gazed up at her, speaking softly. He told her that he had waited for this day for a long time and was grateful to the heroes for helping him. He explained that after her death, life had become worse than death itself. Gently touching Eliza's palm, he asked her to return to the way she was, to restore her original hairstyle because he wanted to see his real wife one last time. As he looked at her, he mentioned that the representatives of the dark blue race had promised to help bring her back, but in exchange, he had to betray humanity. If they could truly do this, he felt it would be a fair trade. But as the words left his mouth, it became clear to him that he was trapped in the abyss of his own lies. Eliza's eyes filled with sorrow as she listened. Suddenly, George let out a bloody cough. His gaze shifted to Michael, and he said that he wanted to trade the information he knew for Eliza's life, since she was not at fault except for falling in love with an idiot like him. When Michael nodded in agreement, George continued, revealing that the people he had been working with were somehow connected to the Crawler Chamber of Commerce. That was the last thing George managed to say before his consciousness slipped away. Tears of despair streamed down Eliza's face as she clutched his body tighter. She began to beg him not to leave her alone. Meanwhile, Rabbit asked Michael what they should do, as they needed to deal with the girl from the dark blue race. Michael raised his hand to stop her, signaling that they should wait. Through her tears, Eliza declared that when she chose to join the dark blue race, she had already been willing to sacrifice everything for George. This was enough for her. She lay down beside him, a peaceful smile on her face, and as she did, blue energy began to emanate from her body, forming a glowing blue ball. Once fully formed, the ball dropped to the ground. Michael, understanding the importance of the energy, picked it up without hesitation, deciding it was better not to leave such a thing behind. Rabbit, distracted by something else, absent-mindedly asked if she could meet someone who would love her as much as George had loved Eliza. Michael ignored the question, concealing the blue ball as he turned to leave. "It's time to go," he said simply, and Lucia followed him silently, a heavy sigh escaping her. As they flew back, Michael suddenly changed his appearance, taking on the form of Raven. Lucia, her irritation mounting, asked where they were headed, but Michael remained silent, fully absorbed in his thoughts. Unable to contain her frustration, Lucia asked if he would at least answer one of her questions, or if he planned to continue playing this silent game. Meanwhile, at the university stadium, the fighting competitions had ended, and it was time for the award ceremony. Lucas and Alice had both improved their rankings and were now reaping the rewards of their hard work. Michael had flown in to watch the ceremony, pleased to see his protégé thriving and even making friends in such a short time. Afterward, he visited the GU place to personally congratulate Lucas. Materializing a green sphere in his palm, he announced that he had improved his ability to A rank and handed the sphere to the surprised young man. Within moments, the sphere was absorbed into Lucas's body. Michael then patted Lucas on the shoulder, telling him that their next goal was the entrance exams and that Lucas had to give it his all. Michael also informed him that he would need to leave for a while. As Michael turned to leave, Lucas called out to him, asking where he was going. Without turning around, Michael replied that his goal was the territory of the 4 seas. That same evening, Austin made his way into the Black Dragon's office. Finding it empty, he quickly located the safe and deduced that the password was likely his brother's birthday, the same password Michael used everywhere. Testing his theory, Austin entered the date of birth, and the safe opened. Inside, he found a book about the territories of the 4 seas. Austin was amazed at his brother's carelessness in using such an important password. He took the book and left the office, whistling a cheerful tune. His actions, however, did not go unnoticed. Edward had seen Austin enter the office and leave with the book. Though he didn't know why Austin wanted it, Edward was happy to see his brother in such high spirits. Later, Edward transported himself to the Heavenly Palace and handed the book to Michael. The book detailed that, from ancient times, 2 races had lived on the planet across 4 continents. After a prolonged war, creatures from another world had invaded the southern lands, enslaving 1/3 of the civilization. To redistribute power, the territory had been divided into 4 parts: the Hero Association, the Iron Blood Army, and the Trade Organization Association. Since then, the territory of the Heroes has been governed by an association bearing the same name, while the territory of the Free Union has been subordinated to a Trade Organization Association. In the Mixed Lands, all these forces coexist under a protective agreement. Although the relationship between the Dark Blue race and the Heroic Stone remained uncertain, all evidence pointed to the Free Sea territory. Michael decided to test this theory and began his search from there. Placing his hand on Austin's shoulder, Michael congratulated him for the great work he had done, noting how it demonstrated his growth as a member of their organization. Austin's eyes lit up with excitement at the praise, eagerly rubbing his palms. He wanted to voice his request, but Michael preemptively spoke, saying that since Austin had passed his test, he would not be deprived. Austin had earned his elixir of abilities, and Michael tossed him a flask containing the potion. Austin immediately unscrewed the lid and winced at the disgusting smell. However, he wasn't deterred by the scent. Having worked hard for this moment, he gulped down the contents of the flask in one go, ignoring the equally terrible taste. As soon as he finished, he felt a wave of weakness wash over him, collapsing to the floor. Confused, he asked Michael what rank the potion was. Michael casually replied that it was B rank. He then explained that the potion contained 2 B rank abilities, an improved werewolf ability and a mask of terror, which used people's fear to boost the wearer's strength. The maximum increase in strength was 9 times, and the fear energy only lasted for 45 minutes. Hearing this, Austin's face lit up with happiness. He jumped to his feet, hugging Michael and expressing his heartfelt gratitude for such a wonderful gift. After saying goodbye to his godson, Michael returned home, where a delightful dinner awaited him, prepared by Valaria. There was a romantic atmosphere surrounding them that evening, and Valaria wore a beautiful black dress that accentuated her figure. Michael shared that he had received an offer for a year-long assignment abroad. With a slightly saddened expression, he mentioned that they could go together. Valaria smiled brightly and assured him that she could take care of herself, encouraging him to work hard for their future together. Michael agreed, raising his glass of wine and drinking it in one swift motion. He wished to resolve all his issues and enjoy life to the fullest. Valaria stood up, walked over to him, and embraced him around the neck, telling him that she would eagerly await his return. Michael hugged her back, a happy smile spreading across his face. He was pleased to hear these words from her. The evening took a passionate turn, and the couple moved to the bedroom, helping each other undress as they enjoyed their last night together before the long separation. The next day, Michael visited Florence's family estate. The butler, recognizing them as members of the judge's organization, greeted them warmly and led them inside. He escorted Michael and his sister to the office of the head of the family, where Ivan and his 2 granddaughters, Anna and Sakura, were already waiting. Ivan greeted them with a joyful smile, mentioning that he had already interacted with members of the judge's organization a few times. Anna immediately recognized Michael and eagerly recalled the time they had flown together on the same flight, which had been captured by the Star Cloak. Michael nodded, replying that it was on that very day that the rooster had noticed him. He had already prepared his cover story and explained that the gentleman had given him an elixir of A-rank ability and allowed him to join the organization. Anna looked at him with suspicion, asking if it was really so easy to obtain an elixir of such a high rank. She also inquired about the ability he had gained from the elixir. Ivan, sensing the tension, raised his hand and shot her a disapproving look, telling her not to be rude to their guests by interrogating them about their abilities. Michael chuckled, reassuring everyone that it was fine. After all, they were future allies, and he had no issue answering a few questions. He then revealed that his ability was called the Folding Plum Navy Suit. Sakura leaned forward in curiosity, admitting she had never heard of such an ability before. Michael explained that this was not surprising, as the ability was a combination of both the martial arts of the underwater army and the plum-style suit. This unique combination allowed him to dodge enemy attacks with the grace and agility of a plum blossom. Anna, still intrigued, asked another question. She pointed to Lucia, who was standing beside him, and asked who she was. Michael answered that she was Rabbit's ward and, like him, she was an A-rank user. Lucia cast a distrustful glance at everyone in the room before speaking. She confirmed her ability was ice control, making it clear that she wasn't entirely trusting of the group. After this, Michael mentioned that the rooster had instructed them to travel through the Free Union Sea territory under the guise of being part of the Florence family. He was curious about the head of the family's thoughts on this arrangement. Ivan rubbed his chin thoughtfully, considering the question. He then replied that it was indeed time for Florence's family to return to the Free Union.